It started like any other calm sunrise on the edge of my vineyard until it didn't. Funny how peace can shatter with something as small as a knock on the door. I was sipping coffee, boots kicked up, watching the fog lift over the fields when I heard that voice. Sharp, rehearsed, and laced with authority. "You're trespassing on borrowed time," she said. Not exactly the greeting you expect before breakfast. Standing at the gate was Marlene Draper, head of the Valley Ridge Association, clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd been waiting all week for this performance. She wasn't here to discuss community dues or zoning paperwork. She was here to tell me my lease had been reassessed and that her nephew was better suited for this property. In her world, that was supposed to sound like policy. In mine, it sounded like theft with paperwork. I stared at her for a moment, trying to decide whether to laugh or start recording. Leave or resist. That was the unspoken choice. But if you know me, you know I don't run from bullies dressed in business casual. This wasn't going to end with me loading boxes into the back of a truck. No, this was the start of something else. A reckoning I didn't see coming, but one I was ready to face. Until that day, I'd lived simply, tending vines and keeping to myself. I paid dues on time, kept my fences mended, and even sponsored the annual harvest fair. Still, Marlene seemed determined to paint me as the community's black sheep. She called herself a guardian of standards. But really, she was just a woman who mistook control for purpose. And she had no idea how fast the ground beneath her was about to shift. Marlene wasn't just strict, she was obsessed with order. The kind of person who alphabetized her spice rack and corrected people's handwriting on shared forms. My first run-in with her crusade for community perfection came after I installed a short split-rail fence around the vineyard's edge. It wasn't flashy, just enough to keep the sheep from wandering onto the road. But to Marlene, it was a violation of architectural integrity. She showed up that afternoon, clipboard tucked under her arm, her perfume cutting through the air like citrus and judgment. "Charming fence," she said flatly, "but we can't allow rustic styles within visible range of the main road. You'll need to remove it." I stayed calm, told her I'd check the association bylaws myself, and sent her on her way. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, she was back. This time, pointing out that my patio looked uncoordinated. My weathered chairs didn't match the approved color palette. I smiled, agreed to review the guidelines, and watched her march away like a general after issuing an ultimatum. Then came the envelope, a typed warning about unauthorized alterations and a hefty fine. No signature, no name, just the cold stamp of bureaucracy. That's when I realized Marlene wasn't enforcing policy. She was declaring war. She had decided that my land, my quiet life, didn't fit her version of perfection. One morning, as I eased my truck down the gravel path, she appeared at the gate again, sunglasses glinting. "This property will be mine," she said evenly, "sooner than you think." From then on, the harassment turned relentless. Fines for excessive outdoor lighting, non-standard bird baths, and even inconsistent hedge symmetry. Each notice felt more absurd than the last. I tried to reason with the association board, but their replies were vague, evasive, almost fearful. It was clear someone was pulling the strings, and I had a sinking feeling exactly whose hands were on them. The board told me the same thing every time I called. just comply. Don't make waves. So, I tried. I really did. I kept my head down and focused on work, hoping Marlene's obsession would fizzle out. But people like her don't let things go. They escalate. The breaking point came when my old field truck sputtered out beside the barn. It was a beat-up relic I used for hauling tools, nothing more. I planned to repair it over the weekend, but by Wednesday I'd received a notice. Abandoned vehicle, visual blight, and of course, another fine. That's when I drew the line. I wasn't paying another cent. Then came the coincidences. The vineyard's front gate hung loose one morning, the bolts half removed. A week later, my irrigation controls were mysteriously jammed. Tools disappeared from the shed, and one dawn I found tire tracks slicing through my fields. My fence splintered and trampled. This wasn't oversight anymore. It was sabotage. Sleep became impossible. Every creak outside set my nerves on fire. Still, I knew fear wasn't a strategy, so I started digging quietly, methodically. Through a public records request, I found what I needed. Marlene had been signing and issuing penalties under her own name, completely bypassing association approval. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was fabricating them. It wasn't enough to accuse her, though. I needed proof she couldn't wriggle away from. So, I began cataloging everything. Time-stamped photos, letters, repair bills, even security footage. The pattern was undeniable. What I needed now was a way to make it matter. I called a lawyer, a sharp woman who specialized in property disputes. If she's falsifying fines, she said, we can take this public. And that was the spark. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. The fight was far from over, but now I had a strategy. And Marlene Draper had no idea what was coming. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Turns out plenty of people had their own Marlene stories. Garden citations, bogus fines, invasive inspections. She'd left a trail of resentment behind her. I spent evenings on porches and over fences, talking with neighbors who were tired of pretending everything was fine. One by one, they started nodding in agreement. Something had to change. The plan came together slowly, but when it did, it felt unstoppable. We gathered copies of the association bylaws, circled every clause she'd violated, and prepared a formal motion to remove her from office. I even made sure our message was impossible to ignore. Signs lining the street the morning of the meeting that read, "Accountability begins here." For the first time, the power dynamic had flipped, and she knew it. The night of the showdown, the community hall was packed. I arrived with my lawyer, a thick folder of evidence, and a dozen determined neighbors. Marlene sat at the head table, tapping her pen, still trying to project control. But when the board reviewed my documents, the falsified fines, the property damage reports, the unauthorized correspondence, her composure cracked. The room was silent, except for the sound of paper shuffling and whispers spreading through the crowd. When the vote was called, the result was decisive. Marlene Draper was removed from her position, effective immediately. Her reign of order was over. I stood, heart pounding but steady, and said, "Maybe now we can bring this place back to what it was meant to be, a community, not a kingdom." There was a ripple of applause. Outside, under the glow of the porch lights, I finally exhaled. What did I take from all this? That no one has the right to rule others through fear. Not in neighborhoods, not in life. If you're cornered, gather your proof, find your allies, and push back with truth. Authority built on ego collapses the moment people stand together. So, if you've ever dealt with your own Marlene, remember, the strongest act of defiance isn't anger, it's unity. Stay grounded, stay brave, and never let anyone rewrite your story for